Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining. I'm Kurt Sasek. I'm Mr. Victor Komlos. He is the consultant with VKom LLC, and he has extensive experience in the sales industry in the beverage world. So he's going to share some of his knowledge with us. So, Victor, hey, thank you so much, man.
Right, it's good to see you.
Awesome. Okay, hey, so let's pick up where we were talking before. So you told me that when you were new to the beverage world out of college, that some people from Gallo recruited you. So do you mind taking us through that story and just tell us how you got into Gallo or how you got your start?
Yeah, absolutely. When I graduated from college, I was not in a rush to leave the city. I graduated from University of Texas in Austin, Texas, and I was not in a rush to get out in the real world, but I did want to. I was actually dating a woman at the time who ended up becoming my wife, and we've been married now for 26 years. But at the time, I was curious to see what that would lead into, which led into an interview and an opportunity with a beer distributorship. And I got that job. And I took that job because it sounded fun. It sounded interesting. It was competitive. And I thought I would be good at it. And I turned out I was. It was fun. And I really had a great time doing it. And about 4 or 5 months after doing it, I got approached by some of my competitors that I'd seen out in the field. Turned out 2 of them had worked at the E&J Gallo winery before, and they told me a story about, hey, you've got an opportunity to join the winery if you are interested in making a career out of this. And before that conversation, I didn't really know what I was going to be doing 5-10 years ahead. But it really opened the doors to me. And what I learned was E&J Gallo had some of the best sales training as an organization in any consumable good. Certainly at the time, there were 3 that people talked about. E&J Gallo, Frito-Lay, of course, and Xerox were some examples that I would hear over and over again. So I was excited to interview for that process.
So what is it that made the Gallo training so special? What was it that, maybe you can give a few examples. What was it about Gallo that really set them apart in terms of their training?
Well, bottom line is they were very thorough. When I got out of college, I would not have qualified for the recruitment process for E&J Gallo. They were very interested in people that were one of 2 types. Either one, they played college sports, or 2, they were former military. And frankly, I just didn't do that. But I did prove myself to people that had worked there as a valuable asset. And I understood and learned some of those critical things as far as impeccable follow through in order to be able to not only make a sale, but also to repeat the sale. What we're talking about consumable good is the necessity to make your products more valuable than those that are similar to you, so that retailer or restaurateur wants to use those over and over again.
So if I'm selling a Chardonnay at $15 a bottle, and you're selling a Chardonnay at $15 a bottle, and you're with Gallo and I'm not, what was the technique, or how do you make yours sound more desirable than because basically you're talking about they taught you how to set your products apart from the competition, if I'm understanding you correctly. So how did they? Was it a technique? What did they do?
Yeah, not only the products. The reality was the follow through and the salesperson, right? Now, let me be also very blunt. The reality is what I'm talking about was 30 years ago. Things have continued to evolve, but at the time, the thing that was critical, that was drilled into our heads, and there are many, many presidents of distributors and executive vice presidents and leaders at big wineries that went through the same program today. I know dozens and dozens of them that learned the same thing, which was the 10 steps to a sales call. And it was an opportunity to qualify an account and be thorough in what you were prospecting for, but also showing and developing a relationship with the account. So that it would start by going into the account with eyes open to look for those opportunities. And I'm not going to waste your audience time right now reciting the 10 steps, but let me tell you, anybody who's been through that program still knows and still uses those 10 steps. It was a very good. Please Google it because it's great. It's very simple, succinct, 10 steps to a sales call. I think you can just type in Gallo 10 steps and it'll pop up for you. But that set us apart from competitors and certainly people that knew more about wine than I did at the time. But nobody was going to out hustle me or out follow up the work that I did in order to earn that customer's trust and then business.
Okay. And you mentioned they typically only hired for the training program of ex-military and athletes.
Well, that was at the time. Today, that has changed. It's certainly a little. It's certainly much more sophisticated as far as the human resources prospect. But I knew people that got recruited before me and also after me as part of the system, and that was the most common attribute that those people had. It was a high work ethic and the idea of working in a team environment. Also, hungry for competition was really important to them. And it pays off. I mean, bottom line, there's no sales organization in the world like the E&J Gallo organization. And still today, they command much respect, and they deserve it, frankly.
Oh, okay, cool. So when I pulled up the 10 steps. So okay, flashcards complete. What did you, without going into too much detail, when you would approach a new client, what was the biggest thing you did differently after you went through the E&J Gallo course?
Yeah, so part of it was qualifying an account so that they would want to do business with you. What I was before was a lot of hustle, and I was really good at trying to learn product attributes, the features to a product. But the reality is customers don't buy features, they buy benefits. And in order to translate as to what those features meant to those customers, that's what produced a good conversation. When I was brand new in the sales world, I believed in a simplistic transactional relationship. I have this bottle of wine that I want to sell you so that you can sell it to your customers, and I'm going to deliver it at the price that I promised to. But what I learned over time, and this is beyond the Gallo winery, but the foundation is there, right? I give them their due as far as laying a good foundation. But then the reality comes maturity and wisdom, which is today the most successful sales transaction, whether it's for a $10 bottle of wine or a $10,000 bottle of spirits. It is customer-centric and a relationship-based environment that comes with trust and follow-through. And the more I know about my customers' needs before I go talk about products, the more likely they are to be interested in what I have to say.
Yeah, I spoke to somebody else who he has his own tequila brand. He's from New York, and he said that he would always get accounts, and he did really well, and he would always get some of the best placements, like for the displays in the store. I said, so what are you doing different? He said, it all just comes down to relationships. He said, when I go into the stores, I'm not always going in there trying to sell something because they get tired of that crap. He said I would just go in there and just chat and just so they got to know me, and then after they got to know me, then I would try to So I'm kind of guessing maybe you did something similar where maybe your approach, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe your approach wasn't, okay, I want to sell my wine to this Total Wine. Maybe you would first just go in there and shop and maybe kind of chat and get to know them, and then I'm not saying all the time, but maybe that's one approach, and then they get to recognize you. So when you do go in and you say something, I don't know, hey, I've been coming in here for the past month, and I've noticed you don't have any Chardonnays in the $15 range. I've got some great ones. Am I kind of on the same wavelength as your approach?
Yeah, well, if you did open up or find that 10 steps to a sales call that I was referring to earlier, what you're really talking about is surveying for opportunities, right? And the idea is understanding what that customer. So one thing that I did early in my career was understand that I'm not going to be successful trying to sell the same thing to the customer if they already have it. But what I did see was that if it was selling to a restaurant or a bar, look, a wine list is dynamic. And in the 90s, the reality was it was unusual for you to find wines. This was in Houston, Texas, to be specific. it was unusual to find glass of wine for less or more than $10. Certainly, they were there in some fine dining restaurants, better wines, but it was a very crowded competition between $5 a glass, $7 a glass, $9 a glass. But that was a benchmark that people were really reluctant to cross. But the idea of instead of just selling a Chardonnay, maybe they had 5 Chardonnays and they had no Sauvignon Blanc, just to lay out the example, right? So if I would survey for those opportunities and then talk to the either it could be waiters, it could be bartenders, it could be the manager themselves to talk to what their customers are buying and to offer an alternative to something that they're all using, that would make them curious. And again, it wasn't about selling a transaction, but offering a viewpoint of something that they might not have seen. And then finally, another thing that Gallo taught us well was to be able to monetize it, to put it in dollar values as to what that transaction, if they were to buy our wine, what it would mean for them over the course of a week or a month or a year in the source of revenue. And that's just an analysis. All of those things fall in the bucket of doing your homework before you start the sales pitch to a prospective customer, whether it's brand new or somebody you've known for a long time. It doesn't do any good to come in and say, this is the best widget that I have, and here's all the reasons why you should buy it. It's understanding what are they using right now that is similar or as an alternative to your widget.
Yeah, that was the approach I used to use when I would try to get clients for Winetasters Choice. And we get a lot of compliments. I don't mean to sound self-complimentary, but I know that the service we offer is very good. I mean, we have employees, not contractors. So I didn't realize for the longest time that people don't care about your product or your service. They care how you can help them. So when I learned that shift, and plus, you can't just assume that people need your product or service to begin with, which is something I used to do. Because I don't have a sales background, I have a chef background. So I had to learn as I went, and that takes a lot longer when somebody's teaching me. And so do your homework. Yeah,
That's really researching the account, Kurt. I mean, and ultimately, there are many similarities with types of accounts. An off-premise account has certain challenges that they have to meet, right? And in the end, if you're understanding that it's revenue that they're looking as a business, then it's up to you to decide how they assign values and priorities. And frankly, in the wine and liquor business, it's by the square inch, right? You've got a product that's going to produce revenue for them, and it's not one transaction, it's repeated transactions. And over time or through promotions, through marketing, there in that locale, that's what's going to attract those customers that are coming into the restaurants, the retailers, the liquor stores, the wine shops. What they have in common is that they have a potential customer walking through that door, and it's a matter of being able to maximize that. You mentioned Total as a great best practice retailer, and certainly they're a fantastic competitor to any retailer. There are dozens of fantastic wine or liquor retailers around the country, and Total's managed to climb and grow their business exponentially because they really understand that value of turning that customer shopping experience into added value purchasing, where they come in looking for something and their clerks who are highly educated and trained in wine products through questioning that customer has a chance to take a chance for a new item. It's a relatively small investment there at Total when it's explained what they're going to be getting through that trial.
Can you elaborate on that? Like, so what is this Total has? I mean, they've grown quite fast, and usually when a company grows fast, it doesn't work out well. But Total, they don't seem to be affected by it. If you grow too fast, that can work against you. But it doesn't seem to have affected Total. So, what is it they're doing? I mean, you said that they have trained salespeople, but what is it they're doing that others aren't? Because when I go into Total, I do love the atmosphere. I think it's better, and the people do seem knowledgeable. But I don't see anything. Of course, I don't know sales like you do, but I don't see anything that's like, oh wow, that's what they're doing. What are they doing that sets them apart?
Well, what I can admire about Total, as a customer and somebody to do business with is, they're very well within their lane. They understand exactly what they're trying to achieve first and foremost, and it's a company theme to reinforce that over and over again. So they're dealing with adults that are legal age to consume alcoholic beverages, and they're focused around that so that their alcoholic beverage consumption is enhanced by anything in that store. So everything in that store is very specific to that experience, whether it's an intimate celebration between two people or just people consuming wine or liquor at their own home, or if it's something much bigger, to a catered event or party or whatever that enables that. But what you don't see, Kurt, is what happens behind the scenes at Total, which is they're very shrewd business people that really control a lot of their own destiny through revenues and profit margin, because they have very aggressive buyers that go and shop for wines, liquors that are exclusive, and they're able to make bluntly more money on those transactions for those exclusive items that they sell. They have those and control that, and limits the shopping opportunity for that consumer. I'll give you a perfect example. You were talking about Gallo before. Gallo sells the top selling Prosecco and top selling Italian wine, sparkling wine in the United States, La Marca Prosecco. It is an overwhelming success for a brand that did not exist 15 years ago. There is no question anybody that consumes wine, especially sparkling wine, knows and is familiar with La Marca Prosecco. And Total also sells La Marca, but they also sell other brands, and they will guide their own customers to try their Prosecco, where they're likely to be making much more margin or gross profit margin through the product that they control from the actual vineyard, bottling, and then resell in the United States. So it's a very efficient model, and they deserve the credit that they get for their rapid expansion. They also are very shrewd with understanding all of the laws that work to their advantage as retailers for quantity purchases and quantity discounts. And again, I don't want to get bogged down into too many of these details, but the reality is that most of the people making money in order to succeed in wine and liquor are making that money at the very beginning, at the purchase of the goods, rather than at the sale of the good.
So when you said they have aggressive buyers and they buy things exclusive, you mean like they will buy a brand, say, I don't know, XYZ Chardonnay, and then only Total Wine's going to get that brand? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've worked for wineries that sell them brands exclusively, and typically they'll put a request for proposal out so that multiple either vineyards or importers can bid on those, and then they will have their own private label or control label that they're going to sell in that marketplace. And it's legal to do in some states where it's not legal to be exclusive. They just buy all of it on a very quick and rapid move, so that there's no leftover in a distributor warehouse per se. But that way they are able to mark that product up appropriately, and you can also see discounting at the retail shelf.
Oh, so if I'm understanding,
I said the word. I want to clarify something. I said the word aggressive buyers. I should have said very competitive, very knowledgeable buyers, right? I mean, they're very good at their job to go pursue brands that are going to add value to the retail shelves. It's a compliment, not a negative.
No, I didn't take it as negative. So when you say they pursue brands that will add value, translated, if we were writing Sales for Dummies book, you mean things with a higher profit margin?
So by nature, look, the idea of a private label or control label at any retailer it exists in every single state where it's legal to do. And those retailers, whether it's a mass grocery store, whether it's Costco, a club store, or liquor stores, and liquor stores can be on a regional basis or like Total on a national basis, certainly go into and look for these contracts through buying bulk wine for their own label. So that opportunity exists when you reach a certain amount of scale. And in order to service or enter those kind of contracts, you have to have that kind of availability and be able to guarantee enough of a vintage. So what I was originally talking about when I mentioned that was it does no one good to only sell one type of wine or one type of liquor, right? The reality is that consumers have favorites and they shop themselves for that type of wine, but the variety is what makes a really good wine or liquor store great. So they can't carry everything. They've got to be able to sell stuff that is going to sell and turn a profit for them. And that's what I mean by adding value. Both the complements their current portfolio or their offerings to their customers, but also adds revenue to their bottom line.
And when they are, something somebody told me, which I think you kind of said without saying so, is they will buy like large quantities, and by doing that, they can get a better price. Kind of like doesn't I think Tom Thumb does that with, or Aldi or one of these supermarkets. Am I right? Is that what Total Wine's doing? They'll buy like large.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have sold private label wines to both. Tom Thumb is part of Albertsons in that district in Texas, and it's also the same ownership as Randall's and Safeway stores. The They look for different opportunities to have those private label wines, and St. Aldi very much so, and they buy wines at different price points. Aldi, similar to Trader Joe's, looks for wines at a lower price point. They want frequency. And of course, there's a great success that happened in the 2000s, a little bit before that, but it really blew up in the 2000s with $2 Chuck at Trader Joe's. And that became a national phenomenon. And in some places today, it still remains. Now it's $3 Chuck, but it's still very inexpensive wine. Other models, More is another great example that now owned by GoPuff. They have a fantastic wine program and liquor program, and part of that buyer's objective is to make sure that they have some exclusive brands that they sell and contract, both domestic wines as well as imported wines.
I always wondered these really inexpensive wines, like the $3 Chuck, or the was it the one from Whole Foods, Three Wishes or whatever. I always wondered, you think they're making a good profit on those wines?
Oh, absolutely. I can confirm they're making a good profit on that wine.
But they're so cheap.
Well, look, the reality is whether you use the analogy from automobiles to clothing, right? There are different price points for similar type things. And it might be exclusivity, it might be craftsmanship. There are many different factors as to what factor in with the cost of goods. But the reality is that there are millions of gallons of wine that are produced every year around the world. And depending on the region that you're talking about, that's what I meant by aggressive and knowledgeable buyers. There are some global conventions that happen. There's one happening in San Francisco in May, the Bulk Wine Show. There's a huge show in Germany called Pro Wine that represents not only branded and finished goods, but also bulk wine. So that's just one segment of the wine business. The reality is that I think what has been fantastic being in this business over the last 10 years, the real business has been in premiumization of wines and liquor. And what I was talking about earlier was my example that in the 90s, it was hard. I remember being in a restaurant, it was called the Martini Bar in Houston, and I was selling vodka at the time, and I'd worked out a profit calculator the exact same way I had learned at Gallo. This is years after I'd left Gallo, but I was applying it to martinis with the vodka. And the general manager, his reaction was not only negative, but it was hostile. And he was telling me, he can't sell anything, a martini more than $5. That is his cap. That's all his customers would be willing to pay. And what I was trying to convince him was there was an opportunity to introduce a different priced martini. And it was just, I did not get the sale, by the way. I did much later, but it took him, he was a late adapter to the idea of different prices. The funny thing is today in Houston, the same city, it's hard to find restaurants that have martinis for less than $15. I mean, you can find them. There's restaurants out there that you can find a $10 martini, but it's very comfortable for somebody that has never paid less than $15 for a martini in the last year. And you can say that on any age group, whether it's a Gen Zer, a millennial, a Gen Xer, or a boomer, is that's just become the norm now, is that premiumization. And I think that's the most significant thing that's happened in the wine business over the last, really, since I've been in it.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, with anything lower price, whether it be a dish on the menu or the wine, the trick to making money there is selling it in volume.
Yes, that is correct.
One thing I wondered about is you look at these premium spirits out there. We'll just talk about spirits for a second. And we represent some of them. And I know that some of them, they're not making much profit. Because obviously it's more expensive to make a premium spirit. So how do you think these brands that are offering premium spirits that are making a much smaller profit margin, who do you think it is that, I'm trying to understand that business model as to how they stay in business, unless it's just a matter of they're making enough money to pay the bills and maybe a little bit extra to invest in the business. But then the idea being, this is what it was explained to me, the idea being is that, well, hopefully if your spirit is good enough, you keep promoting it, it'll get bigger, and then hopefully nationally distributed, and you find your pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. Is that off the mark? Or?
No, I think, look, the reality is that as long as companies are able to sustain their business, there are different decisions being made by one company that won't suit another company around a certain product, right? And I work and I consult with different wine companies as well as liquor companies. And I will tell you that they have different target profit margins. And some have expectations of losing money because they are interested in marketing the brand aggressively in the United States. And I will tell you that's something that's significantly different between liquor and wine. Wine is much more a trial item, and you're less likely to get a consumer to try a liquor that they're unfamiliar with. It's just part of the human characteristics the observations that we learn in the business. But if they see it and they hear about it, they're much more likely to be open-minded to it in that case. So therefore, a liquor company typically spends more in marketing costs and promotional activity at the beginning of a launch. And certainly there are some great examples of that that you can think of. I don't need to go into those details right now. But I would just summarize by saying they're different targets for a company. And if a company is making 30% gross profit margin, they may be elated at that, while another company is not going to do anything for less than 60% gross profit margin. And that all has to do with revenue expectations and gross profit margins of each individual company and their either marketing plan, inventory plan. There's a lot of different factors behind the scenes. I think what all these products have in common is, again, the liquor and wine industry has only gotten better over the last 30 years on a global level, that there are very few bad wines in the marketplace now. Now, there's some that are very inexpensive, but people are happy with the flavors they're tasting and what they're drinking at those price points, and that's what keeps them coming back to that. That example I was talking about before around La Marca, I was working on a proposal for Costco, and they have a Prosecco that they sell at $6.99. And they need another 400,000 cases of this projected for the next year. There's some wineries that would do backflips to do 40,000 cases in a year. But based on analytics and sales data that they know they have at a run rate they have. Now, meanwhile, Gallo isn't going to blink, and they're selling their La Marca at a retail price almost double that for the Kirkland Prosecco. In most marketplaces, it's $12.99 and higher. There's some exceptions to that. But again, both are successful because they feed a need for that those customers of those retailers in a different way.
Speaking of La Marca, I mean, 15 years ago it didn't exist, and now it's like the best selling. If you want to use E&J Gallo, that's fine, or if you want to make up a brand. So if I want to, let's say I have the money and the power and the resources, and I launch a new Prosecco, and I want it to be the next biggest Prosecco, or it could be vodka or gin, doesn't matter. I mean, look at Tito's. When you look at what E&J Gallo did with La Marca, when you look at what Tito's did with Tito's, what did they do that other brands are not? Because there are plenty of brands that are just as good in the same price point. No disrespect to La Marca and Tito's. But
I think you bring up a really good point, right? I mean, this is the phenomenon that happens, and it's the same thing that can be said about things in social media, right? What makes things go viral is that it speaks to that person enough that they want to rewatch it and even share it with someone else.
Yeah.
And the reality, and Tito Beverage, what a fantastic success. The entire company, one of the best companies in the business right now. I applaud everything that they've been doing. But let me tell you, he started that business reluctantly. He did not want to be in the liquor business. He wanted to sell his distillation process to a much larger company. And 25 years later, he's the top selling liquor in the United States. That brand started in 1997. And nobody in the liquor business, in the establishment, took him seriously for probably 3 years. People would laugh behind his back about who does this guy think he is. But he kept at it, and he hired people that knew what they were doing in the 3-tier system to help support the business. He kept it very simple and straightforward with packaging. If you look at it, very little has changed with his labels. He has added new size offerings, but he doesn't do flavored vodkas. He doesn't do a lot of other distractions. And meanwhile, he has built the world's largest, in the United States, most successful brand through follow-through and great effort because he has a great sales team behind him. So kudos to them. They deserve it. Same thing with La Marca, right? They're making that brand known out in the marketplace by servicing those accounts and giving what they want to. And the brand promise is what that consumer expects. Delicious at the price point they want so that they want to keep repurchasing.
You said something about Tito's distillation, and they were laughing at him. What was he doing that's different?
Well, early,
I mean, at the time.
Well, the details that I was told at the time, and I worked at a distributor at the time. We sold the top selling vodkas. We sold Smirnoff. We sold Absolute. We sold Stoli. We had basically a lockup in the business, and it would not have made sense. We also sold Sky Vodka, by the way. So these are all great top-selling vodkas at the time, and we did not need to bring in another vodka at the time. But with the story, I was told that he was trying to sell his distillation process to make a clean drink to several of the distilleries, specifically out of Kentucky and Tennessee. And then some of the global powerhouses, but they weren't interested in hearing it. They instead wanted to see what the brand would perform like, and he turned it into the most successful brand. So a complete success story out of Austin, Texas.
And wasn't he one of the first ones, or the first one, to make a gluten-free vodka? Isn't that one of the things people laughed at?
No, so and here's the great part about this is that gluten and in the process, either winemaking or byproduct of the distillation product, right? And it's not in every product. It really depends on what's in it and what it's made from. The reality is that those wheat products have gluten, and Tito's didn't, right? So that same thing could be said for many, but it was a good marketing emphasis to be able to make that clear. And so you pick up on that now today, and you talk about it, and you remember it. That just happens to be when you noticed it. When people first noticed Tito's, what they would talk about is that it said handcrafted was on the label. In fact, he got sued for that about 10 years ago
Yeah.
and won his court case. But the allegations that were made against him, he was able to prove that they were doing and making great product there at his distillery in the way he promised. But most of all, his customers were happy with it.
Wow. Wow. But before I let you go, let's just hit one more question. If you have time, is that okay?
I do.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. And also, I want to make sure if there's something I did not cover that you want to cover, let me know. And
No, I think it's been a fun conversation. Hopefully, it's something you're able to use.
yeah, I'm learning a lot. So if I'm learning a lot, I know other people will because I've been in the business a while.
Yeah, it's just one man's opinion.
What's that?
It's just one man's opinion.
Hey, I take it, man. I take it. I'm learning. So one opinion can make all the difference. How about let's talk about beverage trends. I don't know if there's any way to predict trends, but like the past 10 years. Well, let's go back. I'm 51, so I remember in the early 90s, right when I turned 21, craft breweries started popping up. I mean, to this day, I remember when I was in Washington. I think it was in Washington D.C. where I live. I think it was on Capitol Hill actually. And I remember being in a restaurant and they had the big, I don't know what you call them, the big stills to make the beer or whatever. The
Fermentation tanks.
Yeah, those things. And I remember thinking, well, what the hell's that? And so that was my first memory of it. But then, so, craft distilleries are popping up like daisies everywhere and have been since the early 90s. And then over the past 10 years, like this movement of premium spirits.
Yeah.
Where do you think that's coming from? I mean, I know that's probably like saying, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know. Like, where do you think these? Because I mean, we've always.
Well, I think I have a good. I think I have a good answer for this, and let me tell you my perspective. And so we're the same age, and I'll tell you that you're saying craft distilleries, but you're also referencing craft breweries. And I would tell you that they're similar. That the craft brewery boom happened first, but certainly over the last 5 years, craft distilleries have grown very, very quickly. It's a little bit more complicated. It's more regulated. It's higher taxes and more exchange when it comes to the transaction behind the distilleries. But let me just use tequila as an example. You referenced 1991, and I became a tequila expert in the 90s. And I sold Jose Cuervo amongst many other tequilas at the distributor where I worked in. So I got to go to Guadalajara and Jalisco and Tequila, Mexico, many times to become educated, to learn, and also to go discover things. I've seen probably 30 different distilleries or different sites there throughout Mexico with the production of tequila. And definitively in the 90s, tequila was a taken for granted liquor. Most people associated with two brands, either Jose Cuervo or Sauza. It was known as a shot or a mixer. And if you were not consuming it as a shot or mixer, it was mixed with a margarita. But in the United States, that was pretty much the extent of it. And you flash forward 30 years to where tequila is now the most important liquor in the United States. It's the one that the biggest.
Sorry, and the fastest growing.
Fastest growing. That's exactly right. The reason I say it's the most important is because the largest companies in the world, as well as the smallest companies, have their eye on trying to offer something unique out of the tequila category. And there's so many ways to make fantastic tequila if you start with good agave plants and a great distillation process, fermentation and distillation process. and also the contracting to do so out of Jalisco and out of the different districts, the states in Mexico that are now permitted to make um, tequila. You have fantastic successes like Terramana tequila that did not exist 4 years ago. Casa Amigos did not exist 8 years ago. And these are now household names due to the celebrity influence to them, but also because they're great made products and they taste delicious. But it's moved away from just that shot of tequila. Instead, you can find many, many different cocktails, how to consume them, or just on the rocks. And people understand that it's an interesting and delicious drink and the different expressions and styles, whether it's a silver tequila, a reposado, or añejo. And that is lending itself into now the curiosity in mezcal, where a lot of people that considered scotch as a fantastic liquor now have their eyes open to mezcal as a different expression with a different base plant. So I would tell you that premiumization is going to continue. And I see it this way because it's an affordable luxury. And the reality is that each age group, again, by generation, whether it's the baby boomers or the Gen X or millennials, they find if they consume alcohol or wine, they find it an enjoyable and affordable thing to spend money on that they're going to do some socialization with. Again, with their loved one or people they care about, or to entertain people. We see that. So that the Gen Zers that are really just turning 21 now, up into their early, maybe reaching 30 now, are very used to spending over $10 for a cocktail, up to $20 a cocktail in many places, where people in my parents' generation would be aghast at the idea of spending that much money. And it's just the way it's an inflationary indicator, in my opinion. But people have gotten used to it because they enjoy what they're consuming.
Well, cool, man. Hey, look, I appreciate your time, man. I learned quite a bit. And I'm looking forward to getting this posted. And hey, maybe we'll, if you ever want, we'll do part two sometime, man.
All right, man. Kurt, it's great talking with you. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to talking to you on phone, okay?